I think, or see the, I've got my slides up. You can see the slides?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
okay.
can.
So I'm going to talk about a couple of issues with Nietzsche, um, will and the topic of will and the topic of fate, and how they kind of how I see them kind of contrasting, and how I find it interesting. As far as my own personal background, I have over the years pretty much read all of his books at one time or another. I'm definitely not a Nietzsche scholar, and I don't know all of the quotes or anything like that. But you know, I feel like I've read enough so that I've got a good feeling for where he was coming from, and what his inspirations were, and such as that. I want to add that I'm not advocating any of his points. There's a lot of stuff about him I disagree with. I've always been kind of fascinated by him, but you know, for example, he didn't like democracy. He wanted aristocracy, and I don't agree with that. And he's wrote some kind of funny things about women. It just sounds strange to me, but yeah, but still, you know, he's got a lot of cool stuff, a lot of interesting stuff. So I'm going to give you my interpretation of these two issues. So the first kind of orientation that I want to communicate here is it seems like a guy like Nietzsche, his personal life, it seems to me to have weighed pretty heavily on the development of his philosophy. He basically, you can kind of divide his adult life into three segments. I mean, from the time he was about in his mid-20s to mid-30s, he was a surprisingly young, very talented philologist at the University of Basel, and had a friendship with Wagner, which, I mean, if you kind of followed Nietzsche, Nietzsche made a big deal about that and dedicated Birth of Tragedy to him. And it looks like he volunteered for the cavalry in the Franco-Prussian War, right when he was in his mid-20s. Right. I think what I read was that he fell off his horse, and he couldn't be in the cavalry anymore because he was too injured. So he became a medical orderly. But kind of, in the early part of his life, he was going to be in the cavalry, and he was this hotshot professor. And as things unraveled, it didn't really work out all that great for him. I mean, after about 10 years, when he was a medical orderly, he became pretty ill with like dysentery and I think it was diphtheria. Anyway, he was just a mess. And I guess that influenced or affected his career after that. I'm not sure, because I don't know all the details, but I think that's pretty much what happened. He had to retire anyway in his mid-30s. And for 10 years, he lived out of a trunk. You'd see him in railway stations, and he'd check into boarding houses and publish about one book a year. And he didn't waste his time. You can tell he was doing a lot of thinking. So I mean, he was on his own, with not much money, dragging around his trunk. And unfortunately, by the time he got to 45, he went crazy, which I don't know. So, when my philosophy professor I went to Central Washington, was describing his biography, I think this is kind of, a philosopher that goes insane. Well, that's what happened. I mean, he, in some of his really late writings, like in Ecce Homo, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's the way I've always pronounced it. Like he threw out the section where he was going to take over from God. But towards the end, he was pretty much losing it. He was a bachelor, although he did ask a woman to marry him, and like Kierkegaard. So there's some connection between being a bachelor with poor health and a bunch of problems, and being a great existential writer. So the reason I bring this up is because it seems like it's I mean, it has a big bearing on his writing, because I think if things would have gone differently for him, I mean, maybe if he hadn't become ill, stays at the University of Basel for 30 years, gets married, I mean, we're not going to have these great writings. But so anyway, that's the bit of a preface. Now on to the next slide. I mean, so if you've heard of Nietzsche at all, you know about will. So he, you know, in all of his writings, he kind of projects the idea that man is a kind of a project, and it's not really done. And like here in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Thus Spake Zarathustra, and like the old English, you know, writing of it. I teach you the overman. Man is something that shall be overcome. Man is a rope tied between beast and overman. My screen here is partly truncated, so I might mess up the sentence anyway. But what is great in man is that he is a bridge and not an end. So I mean, he's very willful, and he's you know, the attitude that he conveys is one of action. This is not passive. This is not oh, I'm just going to accept my fate, whatever it is. I mean, he's very much going to be making decisions, and not really going to accept the status quo. And he talked a lot about kind of being tough, and as a philosopher and as a mind, and as a mentally is what I meant to say. Like I'm going to read a couple of really brief quotes from. This is my original copy of Beyond Good and Evil. I read it when I was 21, but like he's basically trying to say, okay, well, you can create your own truth. Like this is Beyond Good and Evil 4. The falseness of a judgment, here I quote, the falseness of a judgment is to us not necessarily an objection to the judgment. It is here that our new language perhaps sounds strangest. The question is to what extent it is life advancing, life preserving, species preserving, even species breeding. So, I mean, he's so active. I mean, he's saying you want to take this attitude where you can create your own truth if it's life advancing. So, you know, my topic is fate. When you think about fate, you kind of think about, well, I'm just going to kind of accept what happens. Well, I mean, he doesn't sound like the kind of guy who's going to accept what happens. Here's another, you know, pretty short one. Whither must we direct our hopes? Towards new philosophers. We have no other choice. Towards spirits strong and original enough to make a start on antithetical evaluations and to revalue and reverse what he quote eternal values, which he's kind of mocking eternal values. So there he's talking, you know, about, you know, morality. So he's saying, well, things like we're going to overcome man, we're going to create our own truth, we're going to alter our morality from Platonic forms. I mean, so this kind of gives you an idea of, you know, in general, of what you know, where he's coming from, and it pretty much all sounds, a lot of it sounds like that. Here's another one. I guess I won't really read this one, but because my screen's kind of truncated, let me see if I can fix this. By the way, if I do that, it'll probably mess everything up. But let me actually try something else. Okay, now I can read it. So be strong and independent. Independence is an issue that concerns very few people. It is a prerogative of the strong. And even when somebody has every right to be independent, if he attempts such a thing without having to do so, he proves that he is probably not only strong, but brave to the point of madness. He enters a labyrinth. He multiplies by 1,000 the dangers already inherent in the very act of living. So his writing's full of stuff like this. And, you know, just to wrap up the kind of first segment on will, you know, even when I was 21 and I read this, and I didn't even, having only had 2 philosophy classes, I didn't even really understand what he's talking about. You can kind of see where he's coming from. It's willpower, decisions, actions, man can be overcome. And, you know, so the passages that he has on fate are, it seems, there's a lot less. He talks about fate, it seems like a lot less to me, but So that's why it interests me, because it's this contrast. So I'm going to move on to my fate segment, and a lot of scholars connect. Let's try something else. Oh, okay. Just tinkering with my screen a little bit. A lot of scholars bring up the issue of eternal recurrence, which you see in Nietzsche's work, and connect it with fate. And basically, it's not something that Nietzsche came up with. That I looked this up, and it's kind of an old idea. I think the ancient Greeks and maybe the Indian philosophers have thought like this. It sounds kind of like Buddhism, perhaps, but no, I meant the Indian philosophy. I forget, the reincarnation. But anyway, it's not a difficult thought experiment, and I don't think Nietzsche meant this to be taken literally. But you kind of it's if you're talking about eternity, that if eternity goes back in time forever, everything that can happen already has happened. And if it also goes forward, it's going to happen again in every conceivable variation, and it's inevitable. So the first time I think that I really read this was in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and it was spoken by his fictional character. So he didn't really write eternal recurrence. There's a pretty long passage in Zarathustra about that, but he did in Ecce Homo. My formula for human greatness is amor fati, that one wants to have nothing different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity, not merely to bear the necessary, still less to conceal it. All idealism is mendaciousness before the necessary. Okay, but to love it. So not merely to bear it, but to love it. So, and that sounds quite a bit more sober than those passages that I read. And there's kind of this is the quote that kind of got me talking to Victor, and I brought up the topic of could we have a fatalism, because I've always found this passage to be kind of beautiful in a way, and there's more to it than just this. This is just an extract. It comes from the Gay Science. Anyway, okay. I want to learn more and more to see as beautiful what is necessary in things. Then I shall be one of those who makes things beautiful. Amor fati, there it is again. Let that be my love henceforth. I do not want to wage war against what is ugly. I do not want to accuse. I do not even want to accuse those who accuse. Looking away shall be my only negation. And all in all, on the whole, someday I wish to be a yes-sayer. So, okay, compare that to, the kinds of things I just said, I just quoted, like, creating your own morality, creating your own truth, overcoming man. And now here he says, I don't want to accuse. I don't even want to accuse those who accuse. And to me, it sounded a lot different from him. And it sounds kind of passive in a way. And that juxtaposition and that comparison, it gives me a certain feeling, when I try to look at the totality and the body of his work. And to me, I wrote down a couple of thoughts about this topic of fate and Nietzsche. And I've got a little cheat sheet here I'm reading off. Basically, what he's saying to me here is, don't expect a just world. Nietzsche's life didn't work out. It just didn't, and he never lived to see his books become popular. And he was kind of aware of that. His books weren't really selling too well, but so don't expect a just world. And there's nothing in his philosophy, and this is existentialism. There's nothing really apart from this existence, and you are part of the mess, and you're not exempt from life and things that go wrong. that's what I feel like he's saying here. He's saying, I don't want to accuse those who accuse. I mean, not everything is going to work out. You know, while he's willfully doing everything, he's making room for, not everything's going to work out. This life, that's all there is. And he puts the will and fate together in that fashion. So now that brings me to my last slide, the conclusion. So here's what I kind of came up with, and you know, you're free to disagree. To me, and I'm not the overman, but if you are, or there is one someday, you accept life. Fate could be good, but let's face it, a lot of it is bad. As you're going to accept the life as love, you're going to love the fate. You're going to embrace but that doesn't mean you're going to be passive. You're still active. You're going to be self-determined. You're going to overcome yourself in the world. You're going to impose your will. You're going to be positive, not negative. And so the thing, you're still left with this this juxtaposition of these two things that seem to be kind of the reverse of each other, though they don't have to be. Are they? I mean, that's what. See, I don't really agree with this or disagree with it, but it gets you to think. And that, if a good philosopher gets you to think, and he was a good philosopher, and it's all necessary. The necessary part of what happens, but you can still, impose your will on it. And to me, I don't really think he would love the circumstances of fate. I mean, like what happened to him. A guy like that, I mean, he had big plans for his life, and I don't think he's going to love what actually happened, but it's the process, and it's the reality. It's that's existentialism for him.